Welcome to Squirrel, the podcast for distracted writers, hosted by Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Squirrel. This week, it's episode 18. We're talking all about writing the Murky Middle.
That's right. This is Jody, by the way. She didn't introduce herself.
I was getting there.
Were you or were you not? Did you really forget? I think you forgot.
I forgot.
Yeah. This is Jody, and I'm Candace, and here we go with the Murky Middle. What do you mean by murky? I like that word, by the way. It's a good word.
It's fun to say. So when it comes to writing stories, there's some parts that are easier than others. So like usually you get a great idea, like with how the story will start or how it finishes, or maybe you have a great idea about an amazing character. Like all of those things tend to come a little bit easier because those are the obvious things that a story needs. It needs a really good start or a really good finish or just an amazing character. But it seems like the middle of the story is not something that is on that first list of cool ideas of what the story is going to be like. And so I feel that the middle is trickier than others because we don't really consider it as part of the I need to figure this out process. It almost comes as a surprise. You're like, wait, how do I get from cool beginning to cool ending? Because I have all this space I want to fill because I want to be, I want this to be a book.
Yeah.
And not just a short story or a vignette.
Mm-hmm. I get that. The Murky Middle. I actually love the murkiness of it. Murkiness. Is that a word? Murkiness.
Oh,
I'm writing that one down. Murkiness.
Well, murky describes water that's you can't see through. I mean, that's what's murky, a murky pond.
Okay.
But it describes the middle of a book really well because it's harder to see what needs to happen there.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was first writing, when I got my first idea, like it exploded in my brain. And I started writing really furiously about these characters and about this beginning and about the inciting incident. And then I got to like chapter 7 and I went, I don't know where I'm going with this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have nowhere to go.
And you lose that steam and that excitement because the further you go in, the more you realize you have to figure stuff out. Especially if you are more of a pantser than a plotter.
I know. And I do kind of, I love to just let my characters kind of take over at that point. That is one of the reasons why I like to pants and I like the middle, honestly.
I feel we should step back and define pantsing. Because if you're not sure what we're talking about, this might be a very different discussion. So, pantsing or writing by the seat of your pants. Sometimes people say writing into the dark. It's discovery writing. It's discovery writing.
Basically, you let you have your idea. You have. I mean, I'm a pantser with an idea, with a goal in mind to get at the end. But I really like the creativity that comes when you're just kind of letting things happen. It's like a rush. I have a great time with doing that. But I know where people might think that that's insane. Why would you do that? Why would you just let your characters take over? But that's what I mean. The middle's kind of fun for that. I like to ask the questions and see what happens when you're talking about the middle.
So there is a reason why middles are hard. And it's not only because it's not something that's considered during that original creative burst, but the middle is a very hard-working part of a book. The middle of any story or any movie, if you pay close attention, you almost can mark it to the minute of the middle of a movie when all of a sudden the main character has this aha moment of, oh, I think I know how to solve the problem. This changes everything. And then they try a bunch of things and they fail, which is why it's fun. But your character needs to go from someone who's discovering the extent of the conflict and the problem. And usually the first half of the book is really quite reactionary. They're like, oh, that's what this means. Ooh, I need to do this. I'm not quite sure why. And then you'll get to a point where the character realizes, oh, that's what I need to do. And you get this turning point where they go from being reactive to very active. And that happens almost dead center in almost every single successful story. It'll happen very, very close to the middle.
I remember when we talked about Quidditch. This is episodes ago. But this is what I think about when you say murky middle. There has to be parts that are exploratory, like the exposition that happens between, I'm not talking about just the midpoint of the novel. I'm talking about the getting from, you've made it to A and B, but there's like C, D, and E, and F, and whatever. And you finally get, there's a lot of stuff you just have to write that you don't want to write. You know, like Quidditch. Nobody wants to write or read about Quidditch.
I don't know why you have such hard feelings about Quidditch.
You don't?
I
really
have very strong feelings.
I do have very strong feelings about Quidditch.
It is plot adjacent to have Quidditch in there. But it's also something very normal for a school to have sports
sure.
teams.
And I'm not even talking about that. I'm not talking about Quidditch, honestly, at all. I'm talking about the time that is set apart in order to do that kind of exposition before the actions happen. So you were talking about different plot points from, like, let's look at screenwriting. You have all these different
I love how you're trying to show this to me using I
talk with my hands, everyone, so I'm making little dips with my pen.
It looks like a little roller coaster.
Yeah, so it's like hills. So you have to get from here to here, but there's this part that you have you're
She's pointing to the top of a tiny hill.
You're going up a hill, but then you have to go down again. And that down part is like that murky middle, but it's not right in the middle of it. It's just not the beginning and it's not the end. And it's not one of these action moments, but it's important for your character to explore what's happening at this moment because it will eventually mean something later on. That's what I mean right there. So yeah, the hills and valleys.
If you guys like story structure, Google Story Mountain. There is a diagram that shows these ups and downs of, actually, Story Mountain looks more like a triangle, but you always have to have continually rising action and rising tension.
Well, there is. You can find diagrams.
There is a diagram that goes up and down as well.
Yeah,
and that one's called something else.
There's everyone's got a structure for this. You can find a gazillion structures. I mean, you can do the 3-act structure, or you can do the 6-point, paradigm. I mean, there's like all these different things, diagrams you can Google and finding one that works for you. I mean, any one of them actually would work for you, but it's understanding that you have to do that is important.
And some of the other good stuff you can add to this middle bit is things that raise uncertainty for the character, like any sort of extra event that happens that adds more uncertainty or more tension to what's already happening. And sometimes they call this the fun and games, like finding new and interesting or scary or tense things for this character experience that's going to push him closer to his goal. Like that's all part of filling in that middle part, is giving this character the experience they need to be able to reach the end.
For what I think what needs to be included there, or what I like to do is just, this is a lot of character exploration, right? It's on the same line as what you're saying, but I like to take side characters. Specifically, you're doing your main character and focusing on him, or her, or whoever, but there's also so many other characters that you need to talk with and help with the story. Well, in my experience, how about that? I love characters. I love to write characters. And so I let those characters kind of fill in that part. Help move along the character, our main protagonist in achieving that goal. And that's one of the fun things that I think with being a pantser is letting those other characters, shine a little bit. That's all.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Something wicked this way comes. From the shadows of your mind, where nightmares dance and play, comes a collection of tales that will scare and delight. Featuring 27 stories, poems, and flash fiction pieces, all geared toward kids and inspired by the tone and feel of R.L. Stine's Goosebumps. With stories from amazing horror authors around the world, this anthology is sure to keep you on the edge of your seat. So grab a flashlight, pull up the covers, and prepare to be scared. Just be careful what you wish for. The Big Book of Things That Go Bump in the Night, coming November 14th from Timber Ghost Press, the place where you can find your next creepy, weird, and disturbing read.
So you've talked a little bit about your experience with middles and how it's an opportunity to let other characters shine and let things happen that need to happen. Is there any other, like in some of your books, what are memorable middle things that have happened that you felt really, really helped the story that you originally thought was hard? Like, do you have any hard middle moments you'd like to share?
Well, okay. My first novel, I had a moment. So I put these kids in a magic camp, and it had a secret where they didn't know how to get out of this magic camp. But eventually they would need to get out of this magic camp. And what I did when I was first writing this is, first of all, I didn't know how they were going to get out of this magic camp. I had to figure that out. But I just let these characters kind of like, I don't know, get in trouble and talk to each other and do this, learn more about them. Now, did that all end up in the final novel? It actually didn't. I had so much fun just developing these characters and what was happening there at that time for me and my brain to kind of click, okay, now I can understand how to get out of the camp. It was important for me. It was almost like healthy for me to explore this and to just kind of have fun with nothing really happening, no big plot points that were, important to propel it beyond the fact that they had to get out of the camp. So that it was very, when I eventually went through this with my editor, there were chapters missing from that because she's like, yeah, we're not getting anywhere. And I'm like, I know, it's okay. But it's just so much fun. This stuff is really good stuff. Yeah, but we don't need that. So that's what I can kind of think is how I navigated that murkiness for sure. How about you?
Oh goodness. So in writing my first book, I didn't understand story structure and I didn't understand the purpose of what needed to happen in the middle. I didn't know there were specific things like your character needed to achieve during that time. And so I was so writing into the dark with that. Because I'm like, I know what my goal is. I'm not sure how to get there. Let's just kind of flop around until something happens. And so it took me forever to finish the first book. And when I did, there's still parts of it that I'm like, I didn't understand that enough. And so the story sags a little bit and it gets slow a little bit. And the initial first draft had a whole extra storyline. And if you're familiar with it, poor Elon, the third wheel of the bicycle, this poor fellow had his own storyline, and he had like 60,000 words of him wandering through the countryside to get his love back. And there's all sorts of amusing things that happen during that time, and nobody cares.
Yeah, right.
Because he's really not central to the story at all.
those are kind of experience. I say kind of a lot. I'm so sorry. Those are experiences that you need to go through in order to understand your own writing style, and story creation. I think it's like, I don't want to say like having a baby. You can give all the advice ever that you want, but it doesn't matter. Your experience is going to be different, and you're going to have to create your own path in understanding how you're going to finish this novel.
Well, and once that idea clicks of like, oh, this is kind of what I'm working towards, it does make the process easier. So when I went about doing like my second book, and of course this is the one I butchered during Nano, I kind of had a better idea how that worked. And then going into my third book, I was very confident. I'm like, ooh, I know what needs to happen because of all, because I've done these 2 books already, but now I have internalized what needs to happen in the middle. And that made all the difference in the world for getting from the beginning to the end in less than a decade. So if you do find yourself struggling once you get to chapter 7 or beyond with what needs to happen in that middle, and so what are some things you can do? So one of the things you can do is take a much deeper look at your main character and your main antagonist and figure out what they need to discover that helps change their outlook on how they're going to approach the conflict. What can this antagonist reveal or that helps the hero win?
That's cool.
You also need to make sure that your main character is challenged enough, because if you find it's really hard to write, it's probably because there's not enough tension. There's probably not enough that the character is struggling with that he needs to solve. So throw in an explosion or a dead body. It's so tropey to say that. It's probably the worst writer joke in there. If you need more tension, throw in an explosion or a dead body. No, that does not work for all stories. It might work for yours. So a saggy middle can happen if there's no pressing problem to solve. I do encourage you to read your favorite books and watch your favorite movies and watch for what happens in the middle, because it's pretty easy to see when there's a change that happens in the main character. And so use that as a form of analysis to see what your options could be, what you really like, what you don't like. There's nothing like a little bit of creative movie watching. Do one you've watched a million times, so it's not like a surprise. But if you do watching for that moment, it's kind of fun to point it out because it happens every single time.
That's cool. I tend to I write complicated stories. Always my stories are rather complicated. There's a lot happening in every chapter that is, and it's, I would say that I write episodically, if that makes sense. So I always say that
So do you jump around in the timeline then?
I sometimes write out of order, and that is true. So when there is something that I can't finish or can't figure out, I'll move on to something else so that I don't have to. As we've talked about this before, the resting period. Sometimes I need to leave something to rest a little bit and go focus on another thing. Now, when you're doing fantasy and you have a bunch of different, it's like epic, you've got a bunch of different points of view, which is something that a lot of fantasy that happens, then you can focus on another character and figure out what they're doing a lot, just so you can have a little bit of a resting period so that you can pick up and try to move through that. But every chapter that I write has a cliffhanger. It all kind of arcs into an episode, right? You're just like in my understanding screenwriting and understanding those arcs and within just a commercial break, you need to have an arc. So even though it seems like you aren't achieving any, or you're not going somewhere, you should be building just a little arc within that chapter that you're writing so that you can build up to wherever you're going. And that's why I create problems in my writing, because it's complicated, because I keep writing more problems from all my characters. And that's why it took like forever to write my last book, because I had too much fun.
Then you had problems you had to solve.
Yeah, but so that's one of the things I'd like to bring up, that sometimes you can write out of order, especially when you're writing in different locations or different timelines or whatever. Just something to freshen up your brain so you can get back to solving the problem that you created before. That's all.
So I have tried writing out of order where there's like scenes that are really like exciting to me to write. Mm-hmm. And I know they need to be in the story. And I will go through and I'll be like, but I know I need that and I'm stuck right now. So I'm going to go and do that and come back. And I find that if I keep on going to all the juicy scenes and I don't do the in-between scenes, first of all, the in-between scenes need a lot more excitement. They just need something, because if I'm avoiding them, my reader's probably going to want to avoid them too.
Yeah, but
and that's a bad thing.
But this is the first draft. This is nothing that if you're navigating through the middle, you haven't written it yet. So in the first draft, it's going to be chunky. It's going to be like lopsided. That's what the whole revising part is for. So I understand when you're saying that you're focusing over here and not here, because you don't really want to focus on here. So forcing yourself to focus on here, then maybe it might be better. Or
and I think if you follow your excitement too much, then if you get to a scene that isn't exactly exciting to write, you'll have more of that, I don't want to do this. And that's where the writer's block can set in.
Well, that's an assumption. I mean, I understand that is you have a good point. But it's not going to happen to everybody, because once you're finished with that part, why don't you go back to this one? You might have a good idea of focusing on that.
There you go.
Okay.
Cool. Wisdom from the Ken.
I've just done it. That's all. I wrote my To Dream in Daylight book is 2 different perspectives from different sides of the United States. You know, one's in Portland, one in Chicago. So oftentimes I had to understand what they were both doing, but I wrote them separately and then integrated it later to figure out the action points. But I did not. I sliced it completely. And you can, not that it's obvious, but it's 2 different stories that you're reading in order to, and it's an overarching story, but it does slice and dice. And so that's one of the successes, I would say, of writing things out of order or focusing on one thing and then focusing on another thing. So.
All righty. If you find you're stuck, move on.
Is that the murky middle? I don't know.
That's the murky mess.
It seems like a mess for you, but I think it makes perfect sense in my complicated brain. So
gotcha. So summing up then, so if you find you're struggling, like if you're getting past that excitement of the beginning and you're like, ooh, this is such a cool story and I'm really excited to write it, and then you get to chapter 7 or 15 or 23, and you're like, I don't know what needs to happen next. Chances are you probably need some more conflict. You probably need a better understanding of your conflict. So take a minute to figure it out. It's okay to figure it out. If you try to plunge in and you don't have it figured out, you might find you're doing a lot of discovery writing, which is okay as a way of figuring stuff out. Know that you're not going to be keeping all of it, and that's okay too. Give yourself permission to be kind of messy and experiment with different ideas, because you're going to find one that's amazing. It might not be your 3rd or 1st or 7th. It might take a couple tries to get the one that works perfectly for your story. But it's okay to feel that this is hard. It is hard to piece together complicated stories or stories that just have a lot of moving pieces. So give yourself a little bit of grace, because it's okay to maybe jump around a little bit, maybe try something new. It's okay for things to not work perfectly.
Yeah.
So Miss Frizzle it the whole way. Be messy.
This is my encouragement here, is to take a bath. Take a long bath. Take a bubble bath. Take time away from your story to kind of think about it. I said, soak and talk it out. I will often talk to myself and confirming what my characters are doing or need to do. And that is my encouragement. You should talk it out. Talk to yourself. Don't look at me like I'm crazy.
I do it totally in my car. I talk to myself in my car because it's safe.
Well, when you talk it out, when you're talking out your whatever situation is going on in your head that you have to figure out, it's good to have your brain creates all sorts of different words, but when it comes out of your mouth, your brain remembers it. It's an important detail. So here we're having this. You're having this little conversation with yourself, but your brain is listening, and that's awesome. So that you can create more details just by talking it out. You can kind of figure out the problem. So
it's true for also writing with a pen, like writing longhand.
Yes, exactly.
It accesses a different part of the brain. You might come up with different ideas,
but it tells the brain that it's important. And so, yeah, I love that Jody and I have such a different view on this, because we have very different styles, different styles of writing, different voices in our writing, but it creates different stories, and that's okay, because I think that it's good to get I don't know.
You're getting a full spectrum view
of
the writing process.
Yes, exactly, the writing process. Okay, all right. So next week, what are we talking about? Oh, yes, we're talking about dialogue tags.
I have a feeling we're going to disagree a lot.
Maybe, probably. I don't care, because it doesn't matter, right? Nope. It's all about finding your own voice. But I call this the said episode, where we're going to talk about the word said and how important it is. A whole episode on this one word.
Is said dead? Find out next week.
Exactly. Don't forget to, I know we say this every week, but we would love you to be part of our Patreon, because we have a really great community, and it's a lot of fun to get your input and for you to get all of our little goodies and everything. So please try to, I don't know.
Please try to support us.
Please try to support.
Please
support us, and that would be just fantastic. So, all right, we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Squirrel Podcast for the Distracted Writer with Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. This episode was recorded at the Farmhouse Recording Studio. Please like and subscribe to our podcast for updates and new episodes, and find more information at our website, squirrelpodcast.com. Stay distracted, everyone.
This is why I couldn't find the rest of my notes.
That's why I was like, don't you have a final thought? Oh, no, I'm jumping right into this other part.
Finishing here.
Yeah, but then the final thoughts are right here on this other page.
I always checked.
You did not say anything.
Shoot.
Do we want to motivator?
Do we want to go back in?
No, we don't.
Funk.
Nope, sorry.
No.
We called it. So.
Can we surgically add helpful advice?